without further ado, I want to introduce our next speakers who are going to be here for the next 30 minutes. We have Simon Levin, who is the co-founder and partner of Mosaic Ventures. And the ones who don't know what Mosaic Ventures is, it's a London-based venture capital firm focused on Series A founding. He's been operating and investing in the internet and software-related startups since 1996. And prior to founding Mosaic Ventures, he's been a partner at Accel London, where he led investments in companies such as Etsy, Newton, and MyHeritage. And he's also been investing personally in companies such as Foursquare, Fotolia, and Number 4, to mention a few. Joining Simon on stage, we have a person who's very familiar to this community here in Copenhagen, Hampus Jakobsson. He's an entrepreneur and has founded 2 companies. The first one, the Astonishing Tribe, was acquired by ResearchGate, the company behind Blackberry, in 2010. He's also the founder of Malmö Startups, a co-founder of the Nordic Makers, and today a venture partner in the Berlin-based Blueyard Capital. I'm going to give now over the stage and the audience and everything TechBBQ to you guys. But remember to ask the questions at the slido.com. We're going to go through them later. So you have amazing opportunity to ask that's Simon and Hampus. Simon and Hampus, any question you like. Okay? Great. Stage is yours.
Hello, TechBBQ! So I have more family members than the audience.
Thank you for those very kind intros. My name's Simon. I won't spend any more time kind of introducing myself other than to say I've been investing now 12 years and have yet to make an investment in Copenhagen, but I'm excited about all the energy here and also about the growing density of companies and founders that this area has brought together. And with me today is Hampus Jakobsson, that has traveled from as far away as Malmo across the bridge. Exactly. And I thought I'd bring a Swede into your midst, to talk about his story, as he's covered a very interesting journey over the last 20 years, starting as a founder, serial co-founder, through to becoming an angel, and more recently has joined the venture industry. And we've already done some things together. And I have my phone here, as these are my speaking notes that I made for it. So Hampus, let me start by asking you, just for the audience here, how did you find yourself becoming a founder? If you go back to year dot.
Yeah, it's actually kind of an absurd question because, originally when I was in high school, I thought that the only 2 good ideas I felt of becoming was either a math professor or a sniper. And the first one I can understand, since both my oldest brothers became math professors. I didn't know where a sniper came from, but I guess it was like all of them bad influence from video games. But then I worked at a company in the UK who did arts installations as my first kind of gig after the military service. And I really felt it was amazing to be able to, this was in the heyday .99 boom. So I felt it was amazing to go to somebody, great company, and be able to just do cool stuff, and they paid you. I didn't understand that it was a cohort, like just everybody did that 99. So I thought it was like a startup thing. But when I came back, I really wanted to do that again. So I started an arts company, naturally. So we did an arts installation. And then that arts installation pivoted, after I actually delivered arts installation, pivoted and became the Astonishing Tribe, and then grew from there. So I would say I was a reluctant founder. Like there were no ads for snipers or math professors open, apparently.
And you're being kind of characteristically modest, but I believe that company grew to 180 people and sold to Blackberry, and you had other offers for $150 million. But maybe you can just tell the story of that company, because you didn't chart or follow a traditional route. You didn't raise money from venture capitalists or angels. It was a at the time, a more sort of bootstrapped approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we just started. It was it was organic, bootstrapped. We worked 6 people and essentially doubled the number of employees and revenue every year from 6 to 180. And I think that I remember us going out to actually think about fundraising in 2007. And when we met a couple of VCs, we were really surprised about their questions. We hadn't prepared for those kind of questions. So we had a couple of discussions, then we've just figured, we'll just not take these people's money.
And what did the company do, just for the sort of benefit of the audience?
That's maybe also because why we were bad at raising money, because we couldn't explain it. So what we did is like essentially the top layer of the operative system, mobile phones. So like everything you see on a phone, the user interface. Way back then, it was a part of the operative system. So we delivered that part, which is of course integral to the manufacturer. So our customers were Motorola, Samsung,
so J2ME, all that sort of stuff.
All the whole top, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, back then, there were only like 4 companies in the world did that. And we were the only one that survived doing it, apparently, because, I don't know, we didn't have venture capital. So everyone else just decided to give up. And we just kept hammering at it. So that was it. And then, yeah, it was crazy because the year we got acquired, we were in 12% of all the world's phones shipped that year, which was... That year it shipped, there were like 1.1 billion phones, and like 12% of them were...
So you're in 130 million phones.
Yeah, exactly, a bit more than that, which was just crazy.
And what was your license fee per phone?
We were paid like between 10 and 20 euro cents per phone.
Okay, so it was sort of 15 million business.
So substantial
kind of
revenue and growing. The only problem was there were essentially only 6 or 7 possible customers in the world.
And they took turns to beat you up and negotiate.
Yeah, they were very nice to us. But I think the tricky thing is like the problem when Apple came in is everyone else squeezed down. So suddenly, like we had everybody but LG, and then when Apple came in, we had LG and Apple to talk to. That was the only one who was not our customer.
So when sort of iOS and Android came along, that was the right time to sell.
Yeah. And actually, we didn't really get that because since we're an organic company, we weren't that strategic. Well, we kind of got it, but we had other routes. But then BlackBerry came from nowhere and said, "We need a new operative system. We want you guys. We want to acquire you." And we were just saying, yeah, they're going to become a customer. They're not going to acquire us. They're just going to become a customer. This is a great way from that discussion to a customer discussion. But they were very serious and acquired us in 8 weeks.
And after the acquisition, did you stay at BlackBerry for a while?
I stayed 2 years and ran M&A for BlackBerry. So it was very interesting because suddenly I was the other side of the table and acquired companies for BlackBerry. And that was probably the first time I realized how really, really bad we in the startup world are at explaining what we do. We kind of come in and to the big enterprises and say, we're Uber for X. And the enterprise just look at us like, can you just tell us what you solve for us? So that was 2 years of just trying to understand that actually how bad we are at explaining to our customers what we do, which was very interesting.
Yeah, so I also worked as a buyer in Silicon Valley for Yahoo for many years. And I think the biggest misconception from startups is when they go talk to buyers, they think that there's lots of reasons that the buyer should be interested to buy them. And from the buyer's perspective, the default is always going to be no.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of corporate inertia, and there has to be a very, very powerful reason.
Yeah, I feel
yes.
I agree. I feel it was very rare that somebody pitched us. I think actually 0 times probably somebody pitched us something. I think the times we bought, we were much more like a hungry parent with a kid in the supermarket. We were just super desperate to buy. But the times people came and sold to us, we were usually like just full and fed, and we're like, yeah, we don't need more. Like we don't need, like we politely talked to them. But then suddenly, like 3 days after, we were in panic mode and wanted to buy another kind of company.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are 10,000 startups a year, and at the time when I was at Yahoo, I think we bought 20, 30 companies a year. We were the most acquisitive company in Silicon Valley, and that's probably true today of
Absolutely.
Google or Facebook or whatever. But the ratio of buyers to the number of willing sellers is.
And I think they're accepted. There are a lot of startups, I think, underestimating the integration effort as well. Just thinking, oh, go acquire us and we'll take over your e-commerce or something. The problem is there's already somebody running e-commerce right now, and now you have to joust out that person, and that person is not keen on voting and buying you. It's kind of complicated.
Kamikaze. So you spent 2 years at BlackBerry, and then left, and you decided to jump in again and do another startup.
Yeah, I was very simply by a reason, because I realized I had angel invested in a couple of companies back then. I think back then maybe 20, 25 or something. And then I figured that I'd never raised money. and I didn't know how to do marketing on like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or anything, which is, of course, the majority of how marketing is done. So I felt more and more clueless when I was angel investing and advising companies. I really felt that I actually don't know what I'm talking about, and I either should just stop investing, or I should take a great class of how to do this. And the only class I knew how to take was just start another company and get back at it.
And that was Brisk.
That was Brisk, exactly. We raised $2 million, ended up selling the company for like lawyer fees, almost. Like peanuts, lawyers' fees, and something else, but that's pretty much it.
And if you were to sort of distill the learnings from that sort of second time around, was it, what was different? Was it, did you pick the wrong market?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the thing that failed with Brisk was essentially, I think that we went into the market where it was a massive glass roof, which was like, there are always glass roofs. Like, you have, like in our market with Salesforce, in some markets you have like Google or Facebook or something. And I think that we should have either said, we're going to beat them, or we would avoid them. Now the problem is like our go-to-market strategy really dependent on playing along with them, which was great in the beginning. Because of course we got massive amounts of business playing along with the big people. The problem is like the second we started becoming big and getting traction, then of course they were much less interested in sending business our way and opening up integrations and everything. So I think a lot of people in our space, they instead said, we're going to build a new CRM. We were saying, you have Salesforce, we're going to make it work for you, we're going to complement it. And all the customers were saying, yes, that's finally. But the problem is like the second Salesforce understood that, they were like, we don't like that. And then the second the customers understood that Salesforce were thinking about it, then the customers are saying, yeah, we're waiting 2 more years, and then Salesforce is going to fix it.
And what's your opinion about the Salesforce ecosystem? Is it impregnable now, or is there any way that you can imagine it could be disrupted?
I think it absolutely can be disrupted. I think that Salesforce is pushing themselves further and further down the stack to become like more of an ecosystem player, and I think everybody who has Salesforce hates Salesforce. So I think there's definitely room. I think there's going to be another CRM company the coming years that will beat them.
Just out of interest, if you're willing to say, at Blueyard, what do you use for your CRM?
We use Google Docs. So we use like spreadsheets and Google Docs. That's amazing. And it's like there's some scripts that make that work, but otherwise we don't have a CRM.
Yeah. So we built on Salesforce, but we hate it, like you say, and we've just found another one called Affinity. I can recommend. That's a startup that's much better UI. In any event, I'm with you. I think a lot of people have got it in for Salesforce. So after Brisk, you have gone back to investing, and it's worth saying you've stayed in Malmo. What percentage of your investments are in the sort of Malmo, Copenhagen, sort of Swedish ecosystem,
so
roughly?
I think like 20% is Sweden, I think another 20% is Denmark, and then I think 40-ish% is the rest of Europe. No, 50% the rest of Europe, and then the final 10% are US, Canada.
Okay.
That's about it.
And if you were to sort of generalize about some of the challenges of building a startup in a city like Copenhagen or Malmo, which is, a million-ish people, some talented engineers coming out of Lund and DTU and so forth. It's obviously hard to do so across every category and so forth, but what would you say to some of the audience members and who might?
I find that there are a couple of. I think that the Nordic has one really awesome thing, and that's the fact that we're not trying to sell to only our home market. I think that's the headache when you're in the UK or when you're in Germany, or France even worse, where somebody like you only sell to your own country or your own like postcode in Paris or something. And I think that's tricky. I think the Nordics doesn't have that. I think the tricky thing is in the Nordics we can find amazing developers, amazing designers, but the problem is we can't find leaders who have grown companies from like maybe 20 or something to 100 or 200. And I think that's the stage where it's really tricky. I think when you get to a stage when you're 100, 200 people, 100 people even, you can start to attract international talent. But it's very hard to attract international talent when you're 50 to get somebody to actually relocate here. And I think it's getting better.
It's a nice place to relocate to when the sun's out.
Exactly. I think we should bring people. We bring people here usually in May, July, and then we just tell them that this is what the weather's like, and then we just don't ask them to be like ever come to first interviews in January. No, but I think that like when you're 100 people, I think that's completely different. It's completely different. I think that looking at, for example, like Min Doctor now in Malmo,
right.
They're recruiting and they're just like they're top talent. You're just picking people in Europe or other places and flying them there, and people are relocating. So I think, but then they are at like 100, 150 and growing. So I think it's tricky. How do you get from 50 to 100? That's really a tricky thing. And I think that you can build amazing engineering teams and design teams. But I think that leaders is what we need. And
is there any kind of pattern? Like as a VC, you constantly look for patterns and sometimes misread them. But for me, when I look at Copenhagen and Malmo may be different. Copenhagen in the last 10 years has spawned at least kind of 2 or 3 very significant software businesses, Zendesk and Unity, and both still have a significant portion of their teams here, but the founders moved to San Francisco to continue building the business there. And obviously David from Unity has come back and is one of your friends at Nordic Makers, sort of angel investing. But is there a pattern to, at least in this geography, that the companies needed to move to the US to expand? Because
I think there are 2 reasons to move, and you have like TradeShift, another example.
Yeah,
and I think
that's another one.
I think that and of course Just Eat did it, but to London. I think that what I see people, there are 2 reasons to move. There's one reason, it's because of capital. Because like you can raise your seed round here, you can raise your A round here, not with local investors, but you can raise your A round here. But I think when you're raising your B round, you need people to really trust you. And then like having the HQ up in the Eskimos, people are kind of a bit reluctant. They would prefer to have you on the backyard. So I think it's getting hard. But at the same time, every time there's that Spotify, a Zendesk, people are getting more and more fine with it. But I think the other problem I have is that when people are building businesses which inherently have customers, Silicon Valley customers, it's really tricky to build them from here.
So it's easier for a Spotify where you're selling through an app store or down the wire.
I think Spotify can be fine, actually. Spotify are very far away from the Silicon Valley mentally in a lot of senses. I think it's really tricky. If you're doing anything in developer tools, if you're doing anything in heavy enterprises, and when I say heavy enterprises, I mean not like...
Yeah, Zendesk is...
Like Zendesk. It's like when you're selling like $5,000 a month kind of tickets, they're only here. How many customers can you find? Like 50, maybe. Right. And I think if you're in San Francisco, if you just go on 108, you'll probably have 10,000 customers.
Right. So you need to move at the minimum sales and marketing there, and maybe more.
But I think for certain companies, I think that if you look at, for example, Mapillary, who are like, their sales is completely different, and what they're doing is completely different, they can probably build and sell from here.
That's a mapping company based in Malmo, for those of you who don't know. A very talented founder that Hampus is close with. I mean, what was interesting for us at Mosaic is when we did a sort of back-of-the-envelope analysis of the 50-plus unicorns that have been built in Europe in the last decade. In fact, all but 3 or 4 of them have stayed here. Mm. And interestingly, both Zendesk and Unity were 2 of the ones that had left. But I think you're right. I think it's not related to Copenhagen or a small city per se, but rather just access to market, access to customers, and in their case, access to capital as well. And
it's getting more and more popular with remote teams. I mean, and I think that also, I think there's an interesting world between being in primary market and secondary market. So like if you listen to, for example, there's an amazing interview with a Shopify founder, and they're in Ottawa.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. I remember meeting him when it was 7 people, and
another 5,000. And the reason they can be 5,000 is because they're the biggest player in Ottawa, and they're one of the biggest players in Canada.
And it's a good team, but they were, proper Ruby guys.
Yeah, so I think that's like, I mean, I think my first company, essentially, if you went out of university and were good in computer science, they were essentially either you joined you joined Ubisoft, they had a huge office that acquired in Malmo, or you joined us. So it's like, okay, these are the 2.
Those are the 2 choices.
The 2 choices, which was great for us, of course. And I think that's, if you're in San Francisco, that's never going to happen. So I think it's sometimes being in a secondary market can be good, but if your customers are in San Francisco, you should probably be there.
Okay. So after an angel set of activities, I think 100-plus companies.
86 only, so thankfully not that old at all.
You've recently joined Blueyard, which is a Berlin-based VC focusing on decentralized...
Yeah, and essentially infrastructure in a sense.
What's been the biggest difference in the mindset between investing as a as an angel prolifically to a venture capitalist in your experience?
I think like horribly. The thing is, the difference when you like the further up you get. I remember when we got acquired, when we just as an analogy, when we got acquired at TAT, I mean, TAT was one of the leading companies' user interfaces. But the thing is, you get acquired, it was like a zoom, like if somebody picked you out of the jungle and suddenly you can see it from above. When you see the jungle from above, like you realize that the sea is a lake. You realize that the mountain is a hill. You just like see it from above. And I would say it's kind of the same doing the angel to VC route. It's like because I get one step later in the food chain, instead of doing like angel rounds and seed rounds, I do A rounds and B rounds. And the thing is, suddenly when you look downstream, you really realize who actually get all the way. And I think that what the biggest change for me is that you have to be a 5-star founder. And I think as an angel investor, I was more going, this is an amazing person, and if I would be very crass, it's a 4-star founder, and he or she will develop. And I think at Blueyard, I'm much more, this is a 4-star founder, and in 18 months, they need to raise like an $8 million round. You don't develop that fast. God damn, that's sad. And I think it's really sad, and it's a really crass realization. So there are many companies I look at, and I just go, couldn't the founder have been just slightly better? And then sometimes you revisit and you hope, but
yeah, sometimes you're wrong as well. Which
absolutely,
is
often I'm wrong. I mean, I think that I think that if I counted the times Blueyard were right versus wrong, I mean, of course
we're wrong more often.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's actually our footer not our footer to our email template, but when we send out a no, the last sentence in the email is always, so just clearly this is a no, but just so you know, we are more wrong than right, which means that you're probably right.
And do you have that saved in your email template?
No, like I usually write it, but I usually just find so people don't think I'm not trying to rain on your parade. You're probably completely right. We just don't get it. And I usually like write the feedback, which could be the indications why we're not getting it. Like we could say like, this is our biggest fear, this is the biggest doubt we have, but you're probably right about it, but you should be better at explaining so that we would fall in love.
And when you, just out of interest, and you're waiting patiently, but yeah, when you pass, do you normally pass by email, or do you sometimes pick up the phone as well? You always do it by email?
I always by email. And the reason is because just my belief on how people work, I actually honestly also, and this is maybe just me, but Blueyard does it most of the time. But I would say like I want to even fire people on email. But the reason is this: I hate if somebody would give me negative feedback and I can't be structured. Like I'm an engineer, I'm a computer science guy. Like if somebody would like walk up to me and say, "Can we meet for 15 minutes?" I would be like, "Sure." I would expect the worst. I would have panic until we meet, and they say, "Have you seen the new coffee machine?" I'm like, "Fuck! I thought you would fire me. Like, don't do that." But the same way, if somebody would fire me, I would not be able to take it in. I would just be sitting there like, and either I would blank or I go into defensive.
So you like the asynchronous
I read it and I go like, I am fired. I understand why. And in the email says, "Do you want to talk? Here are the 9 times I can talk." So like, when actually like we can talk about it. But I would hate to be fired or let down synchronously. Okay. So, like with my wife, I hear the critique. Can you send me an email? No, I'm like, my wife is kind of like, she does like synchronously.
Does she send you emails?
No, sadly not. Yeah. She doesn't even use Google Calendar. It's my she's really tricky to work with actually, but she has other qualities.
Okay, that's great. So, some questions from the floor. You're waiting patiently.
Phone, yes, it's up. So slider.com, you still have time to ask questions from Simon and Hampus, but we got one that is, how do you avoid getting overwhelmed with the amount of opportunities when looking for companies, technologies to invest in?
I guess that's a question for both of us.
Yes, both of you.
So shall I go first? Shall I take it?
You go first, absolutely.
So just to give you the numbers, at Mosaic, we make about 5 to 10 new investments a year at Series A typically, and we assent or see over 1,000 companies a year. So it's less than 1% conversion from everything that lands in our inbox to investments we make. And we probably do approximately sort of 60 or 70 deep dives on companies where there's sort of multiple meetings and we get to know them well. And the biggest single determinant of whether you sort of get down the funnel to a deep dive and then eventually to someone that we make an offer to tends to be, in fact, the quality of the referral to us. So I've actually, and I'll say this in an investment career of, I'm in my 2nd decade, I've never made an investment in something that landed in my inbox cold, ever. There's a few things that I've nearly got to. I've made an offer, but I've actually never completed one. And so it's very straightforward these days with LinkedIn and so forth to figure out a mutual connection that we might have. And if in particular you can find either a person or a hook through which to kind of filter and qualify yourself for not just me, but any kind of investor, I think that helps the investor determine immediately that you are worth someone spending time with and so forth, and the endorsement of that introduction is very helpful. So that would be sort of my quick summary, but would you have anything to add to that?
I would say like 100% the same, and it's super sad because I just feel like the problem of that, and it's exactly the same for me. I think that the only few investments I've done when I haven't got a referral is because I went and spoke at an incubator in a not capital and was stuck there until the plane left, and then spent a lot of time with some of the startups and fell in love with a random founder. That's like the only thing, and that means either get a referral or go to an accelerator, which is far off.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I've
done investments where we haven't been referred, but where I've been outbound. Where I look at a space and I research it and figure out the 15 companies and pick the one, so where I'm the hunter. But I would say of the investments that we make as Mosaic, and I'm guessing this is true of pretty much every venture firm, including Blueyard, the majority, over half, come in through an entrepreneur referral, a referral from another investor, and our ecosystem. And I think that's true of every venture firm.
Yeah, and I think the crazy thing, it's quite easy actually to find referrals, because either you can go through your angels if you have any, or previous VCs. You can go through the LinkedIn, as you said. You can go
other
through
entrepreneurs,
the portfolio. It's like there's so many opportunities to find routes, and still people just cold email. And I think when I get a cold email, usually I just look at it for a second and randomly I might respond. I used to respond to everything, but nowadays I just feel like there's just too much to respond to.
And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't even say Hampus. They just say someone else or.
Yeah, exactly. I love it when you get a template email and it says this is a unique opportunity to invest in, and it's just it's great that you're sending me and 400 other people you scraped off Crunchbake a unique opportunity. But it's sad. I think that the question is really legit, because the problem is that. You just get a lot of unsolicited questions of do you want to invest, and here's our deck and everything. And I understand the reasoning, because you're in the business of investing, I'm in the business of wanting an investment. Shouldn't we meet? And I think it just makes sense. But the sad part is that there's just overwhelming amounts. So go through a trusted referral. The good thing I find about going a trusted referral too is if somebody that knows both of us does the intro, first of all, there's some filtering happening. But the other thing is their biggest reason I sometimes take a meeting is okay, Janet introduced us. I can't say no, because Janet is going to ask how it went. So for Janet's sake, I'm going to take this meeting, even if I already decided, which means that I will take the meeting. And that's just so funny. I think that sometimes I again oh, this was a good company. It's interesting. But I already had thought of it. No, but I'm doing it for Janet's sake. So I think that referrals are great.
Yeah, but in that respect, Janet's reputation and your relationship with her made that meeting happen, which otherwise it wouldn't have.
And it's the same for angels, I would say. Angels are pretty much the same, unless you meet an angel at a random place.
So the answer to the question is find someone in common, ideally someone who's well known to both of you and that can help you. Like
a common connection or somebody. Yeah.
Or write something very insightful. I actually find sometimes somebody has written a really amazing blog post, and I read that and I comment, and they comment back on the blog post, and then we start emailing, and then something happens, which is oh, we share an interest about this topic. But then that's of course it's a hard way to figure it out.
And it's a human business in the end, really.
It is. Yeah. Were there any other questions from the slide?
Any other questions? We have time for one short one.
No,
we have two questions here. Let's check them out.
That's great. We have two questions.
Cool. I'm going to pick one of them.
The best one.
Yes, I'm sure you have. Ooh. So if investments decisions are chiefly dependent on reliable referrals, how do you make sure you have a diverse network to tap into?
Exactly. That was exactly my point that I was starting to say. I think the biggest headache about referrals is that it creates a very strange dynamic of, I would say not only undiversity, but the problem is it strengthens the pattern recognition that already exists. But I think it's a very important thing. The investment decision has very little to do with your referral. but it's the intro. The decision, at least I guess your guys the same. That is based on merit, but absolutely the referral. I think that the thing about that is I actually think we can solve the diversity issue about it. And I think that that's thanks to the fact that the ecosystem itself is getting slightly more diverse. Yeah. So there are good contacts, but it is an issue. And I think in certain markets it's a huge issue. Yeah. So I actually get slightly pissed off when you see that.
Yeah, it's not the same thing to be introduced to something as to how you make the investment decision, which tends to be in a small partnership and it's voting and so forth. And most of the active venture firms kind of see a big portion of the market. So at Mosaic, just to give you the numbers, if we see, as I mentioned earlier, sort of over 1,000 different unique opportunities a year, there might be in the European market as a whole around 600 Series A's, I think there were in 2017, and about 200 of those were done by venture capital firms like us or Blueyard, and the rest were done by sometimes government VCs and so forth. So of those 200 that were done by peer firms, we measure very carefully how many of those did we see and so forth, and we see the vast majority of them typically sourced by referrals, sometimes our own hunting and so forth, events like this, and but the judgment of which to invest in is unfortunately ours and ours alone. And as Hampus said earlier, often we get that wrong. But what can be very important is with angels, seed funds, other entrepreneurs, for them to, as Hampus was saying about Janet, for them to say, look, you really should spend an hour of your time with this person. It's worth your time. That helps to break a logjam in the calendar. So our problem is actually not diversity. Our problem is, for the 5 to 10 bullets that we're making bets with every year, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. But it's not that the top of the funnel is not actually the problem.
It's really tricky, I think, as a newcomer in the industry, of course, because then you might not have that referral connection. And it's like, of course, newcomer to the industry, newcomer to the country, there are definitely tiers of that issue. And the thing is, there's so many times, though, and I think this is the thing, you could see it in two ways. So if you're a female founder, you're definitely going to have a disadvantage because of the world. Sadly, the world has developed so far. It's getting better, but it's slow. The good thing you have, as you are a diverse founder, that means that if you actually ping somebody, the probability of people doing that intro is going to be higher. Because most of us are sane, so most of us would prefer it to be more diverse. So you could use it to your advantage. And then the question is, okay, so let's say you don't have any contacts. The thing is, so there are so many ecosystem players nowadays. You have anything from people who run TechBBQ, people who run Slush, people who run the startups. There's a huge tech ecosystem. And then the people who run Slush ping me and saying, oh, there's this company in Finland, I will take that meeting. And the good thing about the people at the Slush is that they work all the way down from students, or people even doing university, all the way up to people who are raising their B rounds. So I think that you could, first of all, there are always people you can get in a referral to. And the second thing is you can definitely use diversity as an advantage. Because I think most people who want an investment, they wish the ecosystem was a lot more diverse.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that, how do you stand out from the thousands of others? It helps if you can sell and persuade someone else to mentor you and coach you. And so if someone like that is someone that you can attract into the outer tent of your company, that is obviously a very strong signal for people like Hampus and myself.
Thank you. So,
end of questions.
I think it's the end of questions. And let's give the guys a big round of applause for sharing best practices and insights.